Let's get started. So what we're going to look at is things in a person's life, whether it's behaviors, location, situations, time of day, that accelerate a person's practice and put the brakes on a person's practice. Now, the whole spiritual path is about cultivating and developing mind substance. It's a state of vibration of the mind. And when you're, let's say if you've got a lifestyle where there's alcohol involved, the etheric matrix gets dissolved. And when the etheric matrices get dissolved, the fabric of the spirit that you're accumulating through spiritual practice reduces. So this, if a person has a heavy lifestyle, a party type lifestyle, and they're doing spiritual work at the same time, they're accumulating mind substance through their concentration exercises and then losing mind substance through the breaks in the etheric matrix. So this is obviously going to go, you take a step forward and then you're taking a step back. You're basically not getting anywhere. So that would be reducing the essence of the mind. A simple activity like a sport, you have a game of tennis, your mental space is expanded, you're controlling your breath, you're swinging the racket, so you're using more fascia than muscle. You're reading your opponent's intention as you play the game. That expanding of all the bodies, the fascia's opening, the feelings opening, the mind's opening, you have a high degree of mindfulness in the moment. That high intensity exercise, it's going to exhaust you slightly, but the mind will be in a more expanded state, and as the body recovers, it'll be in a better place than before you played the game 24 hours later. So that's something that you get a growth out of it. You get an acceleration of your mental, astral, and physical body out of, versus activities which reduce the quality of who you are. So looking at all the aspects of your life and each activity, and then going, does that activity increase mind substance or does it decrease mind substance? It's not so much about the effect on the physical and astral body, but mostly the effect on the mind. Because as a practicer, you're accumulating concentration, and your relationship to stillness is based on that accumulation. And anything that dissipates the mind substance is problematic. Now, excess ejaculation. Every sperm has a certain amount of mind substance that needs to go into the sperm. And as your body absorbs your spiritual essence to put it into the sperm, there's a drop in mental power, and there's a drop in concentration. So excess ejaculation drains one's meditation capacity, it drains one's concentration capacity. So you always want to ensure that your sperm counts all the way to full, you have a full load before you ejaculate, so that you're not excessively reducing the mind substance. And everyone finds a balance with that. So with this exercise, you just simply list out your lifestyle, you map out your lifestyle and look at each activity and say, does that activity amplify spiritual growth or does that activity reduce spiritual growth? And you're looking at the mind as a battery. Does it add energy to the battery or does it take energy away from that mental battery, from the mind substance? When you get this theme, you'll very, very quickly realize that the poor lifestyle choices are what are depleting the mind, and the concentration type exercise, the activity exercises, the sports, they enliven the mind. It's quite interesting that some of the most powerful, beautiful, energetic fields I've seen around people are usually elite level athletes. It's actually very rare that I'll see a beautiful aura on a lama or a master meditator. Their energy fields aren't normally that strong. So having a really good exercise program combined into your spiritual practice is a really, really big amplifier. Now, if you're looking at what sport to get involved in, there's a few factors which you have to take in consideration. Does it allow your mind to get into the zone? That's most important. That you can release space within your consciousness and not be in an intellectual state of analyzing what you're doing, but an expanded mental state of feeling what you're doing. So that's the number one. Number two is, does it allow your intuition to function? Is it a repetitive loop exercise like running, or does it have a little bit of complexity so your intuition is being stimulated? Like if you're playing tennis, your mind is reading what your opponent is doing, so your intuition is functioning all the time. So you get an amplified or a better effect out of that than, let's say, a repetitive loop exercise like running. And being sensitive to the mental space of the tennis court allows you to read your opponent more effectively. Is there a split between one-pointed concentration and spatial concentration? There usually is. So with a game of tennis, you're concentrating on your opponent, you're concentrating on the ball, and you're opening yourself to the space of the court where you can hit the ball. And this split concentration allows the sensory system of the spirit to be very, very active. You're regulating breathing. When you swing the racket, it's more fascia than muscle. You can't contract the muscle and dominate with muscle contraction to hit a ball. So all those factors are coming into play. Then the third thing to look at, well, there's a couple more. The quality of feeling for your intuition to be able to intuitively read. If the mind is getting emotional and contracted, then that won't be able to function. You have to be able to relax into the exercise well. And then physically, can you activate fascia as you do the exercise? So if you're doing weightlifting, you need a large mental space. You relax the vital energy into that space. You feel your body's relationship to the weight. And then as you do the lift, you use the stretch and the elasticity of the body to do the lift, not the muscle contraction. So you never isolate, you stretch. And if you incorporate balance into the exercise, that's automatically stimulated much, much more. For instance, if you do any type of balance exercise and you start contracting your muscles, you have less balance. If you relax the muscles, you have more balance. So it naturally tends to activate fascia by incorporating balance into your strength training in the gym. Once you've worked out a way to get into the zone quickly, you generate a ritual of how do you get your mind into the right place when you practice that exercise. And the energy automatically starts getting reticulated into your mind. So it starts accumulating in your mental space. And as it accumulates, it needs to be saved. It needs to be utilized and reticulated, not dissipated. And this is an attitude. And it's an attitude of skill development. Now, when you're highly focused on developing a skill, you're paying attention to the details, you're paying attention to how you do it. Let's go have a seat. And you're paying attention to what is your method of improving how you're doing the skill. So there's this little bit of mental analysis in the background while you're doing something. And once you've defined how to improve something and you go back in the zone and you do it and incorporate it, then that is that ownership of that mental energy. So all skills, anyone who's very good at something, like a pianist for instance, they've cultivated and accumulated a large amount of mental energy. It's accumulated in their mind. It's a mental thing. It's not a physical or astral thing. It's their mind is able to do it. And then through that alignment, through how they're feeling in their body, they perform the skill. So without mastering something mentally and putting the mental energy in through the activity, it's just simply not possible to achieve a high skill. It's not it's not something that's purely of the body. It's a mental accumulation. So once we recognize that we're accumulating mental power in every activity we're doing, there's an efficiency in how to accumulate that mental power. Now let's say a person does a basic meditation technique. They read how to do the exercise and then they perform the exercise. There's this analysis of this is what I have to do, and then you do it. And while you're doing it, the intellectual mind is in there ensuring that you're doing it correctly. So you have an analytical relationship to the activity until the activity is done enough so it's an autopilot. Then the intellect falls away, and then you feel the meditation technique. You're in this state of, oh yeah, I can do this, I'm feeling it out. And you go from one superficial layer of the mind operating to a deeper layer of the mind. Once you're in that feeling state, then you can relax into the zone as you do the exercise. So we have these levels of doing it. And it's when you're in the zone where the energy begins to accumulate as mind substance in that particular meditation technique. When you recognize that that's the case, then you can speed up the time it takes to go from learning what the exercise is to feeling the exercise to being in the zone and transform and accumulate mind substance in the exercise. If you weren't aware that this phenomenon exists, you may stay on that beginner's level. You read about the exercise, you think about it, and you do it as a thinking exercise rather than a feeling and being in the zone exercise. And people who practice for a long time can get trapped by their own intellect by contemplating and thinking too much about what they're doing while they do it. You can contemplate the results of your practice after the practice and then make refinements then, but not during the practice. So seeing these stages of alchemy, of mental analysis being present, to moving into a deep feeling, and then through that feeling expanding into the zone and watching yourself perform the exercise and the energies are just moving in accordance to what you're working on, those stages accumulate mind substance very quickly. Now, none of that's going to be of much value if you're dissipating the mind substance through lifestyle activities which are making you lose energy. And anyone who's been on a high level of sport has always known, you've got to be careful not to party too much because you're not going to perform well the next day. It's kind of obvious that your body's going to suffer, your concentration's going to suffer, you won't be synchronized with the team and so forth. Now, when we look at spiritual accumulation of concentration, we're looking at how to get into the zone where there's a deep sense of stillness, that the non-dual mind, the aspect of the mind that is sitting in stillness and allowing potentiality to arise, that relationship to the stillness requires a certain type of mind accumulation. It's different to the accumulation of a person playing a sport. This type of accumulation is recognizing two sides of the coin. We have something in form which we're paying attention to, and then there's a stillness underneath the concentrated mind which accumulates. And that stillness is what we need to develop a relationship with. That remember that everything in the universe is mind substance. All mind substance is individualizing itself through principles, through evolution, through plants, through everything in our environment. Everything is mind. And any skill that you're building is mind substance. You're building a mental substance, a living mind of performing a skill. And underneath that concentration, that energy is moving from form into emptiness and emptiness back into form. Now, emptiness is a mind substance. There's a living intelligence to it. There's an order to it. It keeps all the laws of the universe in order. Every principle in physics is regulated by the akashic mind substance. And that's the door to divinity. So by paying attention to the stillness which accumulates under whatever exercise you're doing, that stillness has the highest value. Because when you recognize that it exists, you're recognizing the mind substance that regulates reality. Everything you experience is based on akashic laws, allowing form to exist, allowing our mind substance to exist, allowing our growth and evolution patterns to exist. And that all comes from akasha. Akasha accumulates under the concentrated mind. So simply by performing an exercise where you get into the zone and then recognizing the stillness underneath it, and then spending time within that stillness and developing a relationship to that universal mind substance, that's the platform of spiritual growth. That's what makes everything happen at a more accelerated rate. When any prophet or saint touches divinity, touches God, it's through stillness that that divinity is touched. So every opportunity you get to concentrate your mind and accumulate mind substance, get into that zone, and then through that zone recognize the stillness underneath it, that's where the lead is being turned into gold. That's where the real value of any practice is. But we still have to go through thinking about the technique, feeling it out as we perform it, getting into the zone, and we're in the zone, we're in an expanded state of consciousness where the mind's occupying more space than normal. We're released of time because we're so concentrated in the present moment that we're not thinking about the past, we're not thinking about the future, we're very, very, very present while in the zone, and that stillness accumulates and strengthens in that state, and then we pay attention to that and develop a relationship with it. Now, because everything in the universe is mind substance, all mind substance is relating to everything else. Everything that's individualized makes relationships with its environment. And in the same way, we make a relationship to the akasha, to the stillness. As a relationship develops, the laws upon which that stillness allow form to exist, which allow us to evolve, allow minds to evolve, the lawfulness underlying that reveals itself. It becomes more and more obvious how things are structured and how things work and how to practice and how to develop a stronger relationship to the stillness, through akasha, to this mind substance. Some people will call this mind substance God, some people call it universal mind, some people call it the Tao. There's all these different words that people attach to what that is. But essentially the door to it is developing a relationship through the stillness, through the void, through equanimity, through simply being quiet and hitting that 0 point. And the moment the mind hits that 0 point, the one appears, and one is a unified field of consciousness with a fabric underlying your mind, potentiality of your mind, and that expresses itself through light. We perceive the non-dual nature of mind as being light, and so there's many traditions that talk about white light and light bodies and so forth. It's when you're in a still state and you turn the consciousness back onto itself, onto the consciousness itself, it radiates light. And we go through this stage of being still, recognizing the light essence of the mind and the field of consciousness upon it vibrates, which all that is still regulated by akasha. And by getting to that state, the higher potentiality of our spiritual growth reveals itself. So all the doors to spiritual practice, the higher doors, become available for finding a way to do a physical activity, a feeling activity, a mental activity, get in the zone, recognize the stillness, and accumulate that. In this accumulation, you're doing two things. You're accumulating mind substance in form, skill development, whether it's a metaphysical skill or a sport, and accumulating mind substance relationship to stillness. And these two, this polarity of emptiness and form, need to be balanced and harmonized. If you're doing more of one than the other, then the consciousness is going to cling to more one than the other, and it becomes unbalanced. So the early stage of development is, okay, train the physical body, train the astral feeling body, and train the mind. As you put 1/3 of your time into each one and you get into the zone and the stillness starts accumulating, now you've got that synchronized. The balance between your time and effort is in developing a relationship between the stillness and developing the relationship to form of the three bodies getting to the zone for the stillness to arise. So your emphasis on how you train and what you train changes over time as you develop an awareness of the akashic field underneath form. Okay, so back to the beginning of the exercise is label and map out all the lifestyle qualities that you've got that amplify the accumulation of mind substance, and then list out all the qualities in your lifestyle that denigrate or dissolve the spirit and take away the power of your mind substance. Once you've plugged all the holes in the dam, more water is going to accumulate, more mind substance is going to accumulate, and you can develop yourself more clearly. There's a book called Initiation to Hermetics by Franz Barden. I suggest having a read of that book. It'll give a lot of great ideas, and then you can just jump straight to the theory, past the theory to the practical section, and start practicing the exercises, and you'll get a lot more benefit. The theory section will make the mind go into a loop. I don't understand this, and you won't get to the practice. So just jump straight to the practice and double back to the theory later, and you get a lot more benefit. Okay, thanks for your time, and let's get into a sit, guys.